the mom was like so stressed. And she called me the next day. She's like, I just need you to know that my son told me I had to sit down and take a deep breath when we were in the dressing room.
Right.
Like, I was just very stressed. Nothing was fitting whenever. And he told me I have to sit down and I have to take a deep breath.
Welcome back to the Prepared School Psych Podcast. On today's podcast, I am chatting with Cara Newman. Cara is a certified life coach, mind-body practitioner, and elementary school teacher. She has worked in the field of education for more than 20 years. She is a lover of life, nature, meditation, mindfulness, polarity work, and taking deep dives into inner work. She believes all answers are within you, not on the outside. She is on a journey to support beautiful souls in reclaiming their power. Her passion in life is supporting others in getting to know themselves in the most intimate and loving ways to unlock the power that has always been within. She loves sharing her stories of resilience and possibility with passion and hopefulness. In working with her, she will help you see how life is happening for you and to form a new perspective. She will challenge you to think differently and experiment with new ways of thinking and being. Her coaching will inspire and empower you. I am so excited to have you here, Cara. Welcome.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Well, we always kick off with such an important question because everyone's always wondering what everyone else is watching. What is your favorite TV show you are watching right now?
So this was a hard question for me because I'm actually not a TV watcher.
Wait.
So in my home, I will tell you that in the background is always young children. I have a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old. So that show is like always on repeat in the background. And I am like, did we already watch this episode? I am more for myself. I can be found at all times on my couch outside reading a book. And I have about like 3 or 4 books going on at the same time. So I would say the house is young children and me are just going to find me with a book.
Lovely, lovely. Well, in one sentence, how would your colleagues describe you as an educator?
I actually asked one of my educators this, and then as far as myself, and then she said it as well. The 3 words that would describe me are like mindful, calm, and aware. I'm usually described as what word from one of my very close teachers. She's like, you're always the teacher who just like loves every single one of the kids. Like I'll give her a kid, in the next year, and I had them, were like, oh, they're the best. And she's like, did you not have this behavior? Did you not? I'm like, no, they were so amazing. And they weren't this like really so well-behaved child in my class either, but I'm just that person who sees a completely different side of a child and I'm able to see that whole child. And that's kind of how my classroom is run as well.
Lovely. Well, how long have you been in the field of education and at what point in your journey did you become interested in or focused in on the mindfulness and mental health?
So I have been in education for 23 years, and I will say that I have always had the focus. I actually was just having, when things just come back to you out of nowhere. And I was thinking, I have a new student teacher, and I was thinking about my student teaching. And I remembered this many years later that my first observation for my student teaching was actually yoga and animals. And I had taught, I had brought all the kids into a room, and we talked about like yoga movements and how the animals move and their awareness of the surroundings. And I hadn't known it at that point in my life, like 23 years ago, or at that point it was even more, that was going to be like eventually the trajectory of like where I was going to end up going. And then in my classroom, I've always been just very aware of the whole child. But I would say that there's been a very big shift in the children that we have in our classrooms versus when I first started 23 years ago to now. And I don't know how much of it is of like the kids or how much of it is me. And, obviously we evolve and we shift and our expectations of kids and what we allow and what we don't allow changes as well. And then I had seen another very big shift, I would say after COVID, but also just with like the increases of technology. And then after COVID, the increases of the Chromebooks in the classroom and all those things. And there was just an uptick in parents in my intake forms at the beginning of the year of labels of anxiety and labels of ADD or labels of ADHD or a lot of labels. But anxiety was like the new one that I kept seeing come up and the new word that I kept seeing come up. And I just started to think to myself, like, there has to be something that we can do in the classroom because that is where they are for so much of their day. And, it was just important to me at some point to kind of shift that classroom where we're not going to learn the academics and we're not going to be able to be here for the academics without the mindset and without the mindfulness and without the whole center child in the classroom.
Well, and it seems like you have done a lot of work in this area, not just bringing it in for your students, but also just the work that you've been sharing and all the coaching and different things like that. I'm just curious, out of all the things that our students need and our classrooms need, why is this topic so important for you?
No, I have always run anxious. I've always been an anxious child. I grew up as an anxious child. I just have always, and now actually through my own inner work, it's more like I was always a deep thinker, but that didn't fit into the mold of what I was told. Like I wasn't the one on the field and I wasn't the one who was like hyper focused on their work. I was the one who was out in my backyard staring at the clouds and being like, what is the world? And I was that very like, always constantly just wanting to understand how things worked and always constantly wanting to understand the outer world. But that did not ever exist in the classroom. So I just started to think either something was wrong with me or we got more tutors to help me. And it became a work harder approach, or it became a there must be something wrong. We can't learn. We can't, and that has always stuck with me as an adult, and that always came with me as an adult. And then when I started to do my own inner healing, that started when I was 30 years old, and the anxiety just got to a point where it was just like my thoughts were overtaking. I believed everything I was thinking, and I read the book Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, and that it was the first time at 30 years old, I'm now 43, where somebody somewhere in a book, and I've been reading since I was 8 years old. And I was an Oprah Winfrey fan. Like, I would be the girl who would ride home and I'd be watching Oprah Winfrey, and like that's just what I watched as a child. So I was always in that field, that deep thinking field. But it wasn't until I was 30 years old, I read Eckhart Tolle Power of Now, and it was just all about based on mindfulness and all about your thoughts and how you don't have to chase your thoughts and how your thoughts are not true. And I remember thinking to myself, why have I not learned this in school? Like, why did I spend so many years in school learning math and science and social studies and reading and writing? But the most important skill I did not learn. I did not learn about my mind. I didn't learn about my brain. And none of that, and I was just, and for some reason, and then that's when I started working with adults now this many years later, but for some reason, my mind always goes back to our children need to learn this at an earlier age. And I think it was so much because of my own suffering with anxiety that then led to chronic pain, that then led to dizziness, that then led to ear problems and all the things where I finally started learning, wow, I have so much power over my brain. But it saddened me that that wasn't until 30 years old that that journey had started. And I believe that there's this top down, bottom up approach where we have to, in my coaching business where I'm working with the healing of the adults. And I believe that so much of what I'm working on healing comes from our childhood and also from school. Like, and I'm not putting blame on anything, but just lessons that we have learned that we have been suppressed our own selves because society. So I believe like we need to work on the healing of adults, but then also like preempt the children who don't not necessarily have to heal as many adults. So it's like then we can finally meet here, like we can meet in the center. And the hope is when, we're all human, we're not going to avoid life. We're going to all be able to like handle life better and differently. So it's important to me because it's something that I personally have gone through. And I think back to my childhood, which was wonderful, but there was just my mind just could not, handle life at times. And I don't want any other child to not find this out until 30 years old that they have control over their own mind.
Well, it makes me think about the movie Inside Out. And I know that I have read so many people on social media sharing, like, isn't it great that our kids are able to see this? But the adult reaction watching this film is that there's like key learnings for the adults because we didn't talk about this
Mhm.
20 years ago at all. And so I definitely see what you're talking about. A lot of adults need that healing. But if we could intervene early, we could avoid a lot of those difficulties that you yourself has experienced. And of course, so many other people have as well.
Yep. Yeah. So it's again, it's that top down, bottom up. And then once I see a world where we're like, then we're meeting in the middle and it's kind of just evened out. And again, life experiences are not stopped because that's just the thing. But the way in which we approach them and handle them is going to change.
Well, I'm curious too. You've mentioned COVID. We know that we've all seen an increase in mental health diagnoses post COVID related building closures and such like that. You talked about so many of our students now are just attached to technology. A lot of those things we know have an increase in mental health diagnoses for our students, especially at the elementary age. Are there other things that you have seen that are also influencing this or causing some of these increases that we're all noticing?
Right. I mean, so I think a few things. I'm a very big energy person. I wouldn't say energy healer, but I'm very big into energy. And I think that we are all kind of co creating and co regulating together. And I think that adults are having a very hard time with over scheduling and overworking. And I believe that the children are really feeding off of us. That's not to blame anyone in any way and in the homes and say any of those things, but it's more of just like, again, with that top down, like as adults, right, learning these skills to regulate ourselves. And then I also feel like in schools, as an educator, it's very hard in schools as an educator without these tools for ourselves to show up into this classroom without that feeling of burnt out, without that feeling of stress, without that feeling of overwhelm. And if we as adults and we as educators don't have those strategies, by default, not purposely, that energy is being sent off to the kids. So I think there's this like spider web of
Yes.
all of these different reasons. And because we care so much, we're trying to like fix each one. But I feel like we also need to get to like the very root of it all and just kind of look at our society as a whole and look at the demands in our society as a whole and look at how we're like living as Americans as a whole. And then really in turn, like our kids, majority of the kids, I'm not gonna say all, are not born into this world like that. Like they weren't born anxious and frazzled, and I really truly believe that they are feeding off of what we're putting out there and as energy into the world. And that's why I think it's so important for everyone collectively to work on that inner work and work on that mindfulness and work on that being more than doing. And and I think it's also demands of school. I think that we're asking kids to do more than a child should be doing. I think that we're asking kids, like I think of, the classrooms and how they walk in and they're there at 9 and they're leaving at 3 and then they're going home and doing homework. And then they have four like tests to study for if you go into the older grades. And we're asking children to be doing things that they're really not mentally capable of doing and or really need to be doing. Um, and I think then we're slapping on these like labels of ADHD or anxiety or ADD or all these things, and we're not necessarily like peeling back the pieces of root causes of some of these problems.
Well, I'm curious for having 20 plus years in the classroom, how have you seen like the impact of you mentioned a lot of parents are mentioning anxiety. Like, what are you noticing from your perspective as a classroom teacher on the students' learning and behavior just in, everyday classroom activities?
So I'm seeing that the kids are like finally in their own nonverbal ways at saying enough is enough. Like that's like, and I don't know if that's just like my view of the classroom and that's just how I see my kids. But I really truly believe that there's just always messages underneath the behavior. And when I give my kids like a minute to just speak or a minute to just share what's on their mind, it usually goes back to what I was just talking about, where their behaviors are because they're overwhelmed. Where I had like write letters to me or just write letters to themselves. And in those letters, it's like, this is too much. School is a lot, and I'm having a really hard time in this subject. And then I go home, and then my coach is telling me I have to try harder. So I really believe that like their behaviors are screaming at us to like back off. Mhm. My mindfulness comes in, and I see the increase in the behaviors, but I also think it's this. I look at it again with that whole perspective, and I was saying my colleague is like, you're always just looking at things so differently, and I'm looking at it as like they are sending us the message that they need help. They're not sending us the message that we need to control their behaviors more. They're not sending us their messages are saying, please stop. We need you to back off. We need kids more. We need to be more creative. We need to just have time to just be. And it's only going to change, to be honest, when we as teachers listen to that. And I think we are. I think there's a lot of blame on like the school system in general, but I believe we have the power. Like I think like when we say school system, it's like you've never even met these people who are in charge of the school system. So in reality, it's the teachers in the classroom who are really in charge, in in control of the power of what's going to happen inside of their classroom. So I think that as educators, we kind of need to unlearn how we learned in school and unlearn our demands and the pressure that we're putting on ourselves. And I am able to see a decrease in the behaviors in the classrooms when the kids are really start to be treated like children and humans and people instead of robots or, things that we're looking for outcomes that sometimes are just not even feasible.
So, can you describe the mindfulness strategies that you do incorporate into your classroom setting and what kind of benefits have you noticed once you started implementing some of these strategies?
So we start off our classroom every day with a meeting. And well, so the kids come in, I believe in a slow start. Again, I'm very into just looking at the children as humans and saying, like, what would I need? So I know at home when my house is all hectic, and I'm sure the kids, I mean, they're coming from the same homes, right? So I have to get two kids out the door and I have to get them to school and I have to get to work. Okay, that's probably happening in these kids' homes too. Like the parents, so I have my kids and they come in and they just have time. They just have time to sit down. They have time to like, mindfully and quietly say hello to their friends. They have a choice. They could read, they could write, they could draw, they could put their head down. They could even have a snack. Like the kids come in, they don't eat, some of them, because it was so are given time in the morning to just do what they need to do. There's no do nows on their desk. There's no like, let's get to work. So it's like really setting the stage and mindfully setting the stage from the very second that they walk into that classroom of this is a safe space. We're going to set you up for how you want your day to look. And that's going to be what do you need right now? Again, you put my head down. It could be write in my journal. It could be read a book. It could be just sit next to my friend and talk about the game last night. Whatever it may be, it's in some sort of, calm manner. My kids laugh because like you want everything calm. Like it's just me. It's just the way I am. And I know that not all kids are calm, but in my classroom, we have to be. And then, so then after they have their time and we can start the day in a very easy way, we then come to the carpet and we have our community center time where we have a sound bowl and we take a mindful minute. I teach them the strategies that I do as an adult. So I feel like if I learned as an adult and I'm learning it at 40 years old, 30 years old, what do I want them to know? So or a day off with the sound bowl and it's just a nice, like one kid comes up and they do it and they just listen to the sound. And I talk about intentions and we talk about visualization. So we talk about, how to set our intentions for the day. What do you want to see in your day? So maybe your intention is to let go of what happened before this. Maybe intention is that you're having a really hard time in math. So your intention is going to be to like tell Mrs. Newman. And when that time comes, we're going to really figure out a strategy to help us focus in math today. Maybe it's, you're nervous for the test, whatever it may be. What is your intention for the day? Maybe it's just that you got a really bad sleep and your intention for this moment right now is to kind of wake yourself up. Oh. So in that moment, we just talk about intentions. How do you want your day to look? And then how you're going to get there. So, what is your intention for now? And how do you see yourself getting there? What are some steps that you could take to get there? Then we do a little good morning check-in where we say good morning. We say good morning to the person. They have to work on the eye contact because that's going back to the technology. I think a lot of the behavior is just because we're not feeling seen and we're not feeling heard and we're not feeling valued because of our heads are like this and we're talking to the top of the head. So then they say good morning. So they'll say good morning, Jenny, and then they check in. So sometimes we have slides with pictures of emotions. Sometimes we check in with songs. So it'll be like, don't worry, it'll be 3 different emotions. So it'll be like, don't worry, be happy, shake it off, or walking on sunshine. And they get to relate to the song. And they'll tell the class how they're feeling if they want to. And then maybe sometimes it comes with a little short little why, and maybe sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it also comes with them telling the class what they need. So it might sound like, I had a really hard night last night and today I just need some patience for my friends. So they're really setting the stage for self-awareness
Yeah.
and for empathy for each other because they're not only sharing about like, I'm aware of this is happening with me, but you might also see this from me. And I do it myself as well. Like, again, if I had like a hard morning, I might say like, my daughter missed the bus. My daughter missed the bus this morning. I had to get her to school. I was then late, boys and girls. So I'm going to work on my own self-regulating. But if you see me and I'm a little frazzled, yeah, it's about myself. It's about me. However, knowing that I'm feeling a little bit frazzled, I could use a little bit of extra quiet time. Quiet.
Wow.
And like we really just all work together to share how we're feeling so that we know that like there's 17 of us. And again, with that co-regulation, it's like, how can I regulate myself? But how can I also be friend? So we start with that. We start with our morning check-in, and then we always read a picture book that's somewhat related to some sort of strategy or like some either related to a holiday, but usually related to some sort of like mental health awareness. And then that's like how we start our day. Then throughout the day, we have different mindful breaks. So throughout the day, we will listen to the sound bowl. We'll check in on how we're feeling and like what we need. So it could be where we're feeling really tired, then we need to energize. It could be like we're feeling really overstimulated. We need to kind of like deregulate.
Wow.
So, and then again, we also talk about, and then I also throughout the day have you do you time. So as we are after each of the subjects that we're doing, we stop and we have some you do time. It could be anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes where the kids could just, again, go back to like, I do me. What do I need right now? So again, that could look like coloring. That could look like playing with the sound bowl. That could look like putting their head down. That could look like eating a snack. So it's just kind of like said, knowing like we're going to work, we're going to focus, but we're also going to have our time. Because I tend to see with brain breaks, as amazing as they are, we're again choosing for the kids. So
Yep.
like they have a very choice-based classroom for the kids where they get to choose what they need when they need it. Because the old kids need to listen to a sound bowl and calm down. Some kids might need energy, and not all kids need. So we go on like, well, what do you need in this moment and how could you meet your own needs? So those are some of the strategies that I use. And then we just continue those throughout the day and just being really mindful of like what each kid needs and developing that self-awareness of them understanding what they need and then being able to communicate it with the class.
Like, I want to come hang out in your classroom. Like, that's the main thing. Not only do I wish I had that when I was a student, but like you mentioned, these are things that as adults,
Yeah.
I just think about, us taking breaks throughout the day, which many times we think we don't have any time for it and we're just rushing, rushing, rushing. And I love that idea of what do I need right now? I myself just thinking about some strategies I've tried to put into my day. There's sometimes that sense of like, well, you have to do it this way. Like we need to have, some breathing time, or that might not always be what I need every single day. Like you mentioned, some days I'm really tired and I need to like up my energy. I don't need to calm down to have the energy to get through the next 3 hours.
So we have like a list of things that you can do. And it's kind of like, here's the list of things that you can do. Which one's going to work for you? And this goes back to what I was saying before, that as teachers, it's like, this was how we were taught in school. And we're continuing that cycle that's not really working, to be honest. And we have, like, we can be given all demands, we can be given all the curriculum, and I'm not taking away from any of those things that are extremely of huge burden for teachers. But when we go back into the classroom, we still have 17 to 30 children, however many children, and then they all have their own needs. And then we're like expecting them and thinking that we can all have the same needs, and then that's kind of just like what we do throughout the class and then really paying attention. And we also kind of talk about like sustained focus time, which is an issue. So, like, how do I have sustained focus time? And a lot of it is when I know that there's going to be a break coming, I can have sustained focus time. And then a lot of it is like, I know that I had a break before I'm starting again.
Right.
So, that, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of that of like, I can do this because I'm not going to be asked to do this from now until 3 o'clock. I'm
Yes.
only going to be asked to do this for 40 minutes. And then after
Mhm.
40 minutes, I'm going to be able to just kind of just be.
I love that. I love that. Well, again, I want to hang out in your classroom. It seems like such an amazing sense of community and all of the things that you were doing every single morning, just in those pieces to really build that sense of community. So everyone is feeling like they belong. What have you kind of noticed for your students when you started implementing some of these strategies? Like, why did you decide like those morning meetings and all those pieces? This is so important in my classrooms.
Right. I mean, I've noticed a sense of more of a sense of community. We don't have the drama in my classroom. Like, there is none. Like, we don't, it just because we're now a family, we're now a community, we're all looking out for ourselves and we're taking care of our own selves.
Yeah.
I've also noticed a difference in like the behavior of the kids in the sense of they're taking care of themselves while also taking care of other people. So, like, so the other day we actually had a talk. We have a program in our school for social emotional learning, but everything I'm talking about is like the supplement to the program.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we were talking about kindness, and the whole circle was talking about kindness for other kids. Like, it was just like, how can I be kind? And it was, oh, I could be more patient. I could do this. I could help this kid. And I turned it around and spoke to them about how they could be kind to themselves
Mhm.
first. And what I'm seeing is this big difference in them, like allowing themselves to first take care of themselves. Like the oxygen mask is first on me.
Yes.
That has completely changed the culture of the classroom because when we're each able to regulate ourselves, then we don't have to do as much co-regulation because we're each kind of in charge of our own emotions and our own self. And there's a lot more awareness of like in those kids who are maybe having a little bit more difficulty. There's no eyes on them. There's no looks to them. It's more of just like, oh, do you need this? Would this work for you? And they're kind of guiding each other and they're helping each other. So there's definitely that sense of community. I just see happier faces as well,
Yeah.
especially during that you do you time. Like they are smiling, they are creating, they are crafting, they are coloring, and they are just being kids, which is a huge piece as well. And I see a difference in their attitude. So we talk a lot about the brain and we talk about growth mindset, fixed mindset, but like in a really adult way. Like we talk about the parts of the brain. We talk about how the different parts of the brain. We read the book, The Elastic Brain, and we talk about from that book all the different parts of the brain and how they're all working together. And the kids being aware of that, like they're using terms like, oh, I can't get this yet, or I don't understand this,
Mhm.
or oh, I know I could try a new strategy, or maybe I don't have to push harder. Maybe I need to walk away from this for 5 minutes. So there's just a difference in it's more of a child centered classroom than a teacher centered classroom, is basically the difference that I have seen. And because they're having more choices and because they're having more self awareness
Mhm.
to kind of have more of a buy in their learning as well.
Have there been any challenges in building these types of systems and implementing these strategies? What kind of challenges have you noticed?
So the funny, I saw this question, excuse me, I almost spelled that. I saw the question and that it makes me laugh because the biggest challenge is that when you have, for me at least, when I have 17 children who are very self aware and who are allowed to make choices for themselves, it's more challenging for the adult because there's less of I don't know what the word is. It's not that there's less control, but it's almost like what is that word where it's like a chaotic chaos? Like not chaotic chaos, but like a structured chaos in the sense.
Yeah, yeah.
we're allowed to do what we want to do. So you might have the kid who's sitting on the carpet and the kid who's sitting at their seats. And like you might have this child doing something that works for them and this kid, but you're navigating, like the kids are navigating it. But then you also have these kids who are finally in control of themselves. And you start to form these empowered children who are leaders. And I know that like, there's again, this is where this is like like an interview as a teacher where it's like, could you tell me your worst quality and you make your worst quality into your best? And this is really what this is, where it's like the most challenging part is that now I have empowered children and I have children who are using their voices and I have children who are self-aware, but the management of that gets to be a little bit tricky. So we have to like really then talk to the kids about like, I want you to be self-aware, but I also want you to be aware of the other kids in the classroom. So like that might, a very simple example might be like self-trust, right? So I'm not going to tell you when you have to go to the bathroom and I'm not going to tell you when you're thirsty and I'm not going to, you know what I mean, do all those things, but then you might have like 3 or 4 kids get up in the middle of the lesson to go get a drink. And we'll talk about that and I'll say to them like, yes, I'm glad that you're trusting your body. And I'm glad that you're thirsty. And I'm glad that, you know, this is a very like, and I'm glad that you want that drink and that you feel comfortable enough to get it up. But we also have to be aware of like time and place, right? Like, you know, you might be in a car and have to go to the bathroom and you have 10 more minutes till you have to go somewhere. So now we think to ourselves, is this the right time? Can I wait? You know, and you don't need me to tell you not to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
You kind of come up with that on your own. Like, I do have to go, but I also know that this is going to probably be about 5, 10 more minutes, like 10 more minutes. So it's like less of a control on me, more of an awareness for the kids, but it's still working together and saying, you're in a classroom. I have 17 kids this year. You're in a classroom with 17 other children. So we also have to be aware of our surroundings. It's a very challenging thing. And the other thing that I find challenging, which is where I wish that my hope is that this could be taught from K to 5. What I find challenging is I teach 4th grade. So I am like unlearning and undoing a lot of things. And it takes me like a good amount of time. And then I'm like, I have to say goodbye to you. So like I'm teaching the kid, like, I'm not going to tell you where to sit. You're going to pick the seat for yourself. And there will be mishaps in it. They are not going to pick the right seat for themselves right away. And we're going to have multiple talks, you know, so that is challenging because there's more on the child than there is like, not more on the child than academics, but that is a part of the day. That's a very big part of the day and it takes up a part of the day. But to me, that's more important than anything. And that's going to create the future that we want. That's going to create the kid for 5th grade that we want, the 6th grade, 7th grade. So I'd rather spend the time in that moment doing that, but it's not like it's just easy. And, you know, and then there's the kids who are just they're navigating it too. Like, wait, I get to make this choice for myself. So the choices are not going to always be the best choices. And one of the challenges is letting go of that control as a teacher.
I'm curious because you mentioned, you know, you're in 4th grade. Ideally, you'd love to see it K through 5. You're spending some time undoing. What have you noticed with your 5th grade team? Because I could see some teachers loving all the work that you're putting into this, and then some students being frustrated that next year's teacher is not letting me make all these, you know, mindful choices and really be thinking about myself all day long. What have you kind of noticed with your 5th grade team?
I would say that that's like another challenge as well. And I think that that comes along with having a culture in a school where we're all learning in the same way and where the kids are all learning in the same way. Not the same way, but where you're really seeing the importance of the children having a little bit more autonomy over themselves. Because I do have parents who are like, oh, he misses you so much or she misses you so much. And, you know, but I do instill still that empowerment. So I think piece is empowering the kids to have the voice for themselves. And we will talk about that. So it's kind of like, yes, you are going to go on to a new teacher. Especially at the end of the year, you are going to go and you are going to have to adapt to that because, you know, that is going to happen in life, especially if you're taking the traditional school approach, and that's where we're at. But you have a voice, and let's learn how to use that voice, and let's learn how to say to a teacher in a respectful way, like, this is what I need. Or,
Mhm.
and we do have teachers, at least in my school, who are having the flexible seating and doing all the things, and they adapt and the kids adapt. But at least I'm giving them the strategies of where they can use their mantras, they can use their breath, they can kind of self-regulate on their own. They can say, I need a break. Like my big thing is like the kids who ask to go to the bathroom 5 times, I'm like, I need you to ask me to take a break. Like I need you to not say, can I go to the bathroom? And I need you to ask me, can I take a break when you need a break? Because then like, again, it's like these little things that they're lying to themselves about. And that like my daughter will say, like, she's like, you overlook everything and you think too deeply about things. I'm like, but I don't. Like a child saying that they need to go to the bathroom every hour when really they need to take a break, I need them to say, I need to take a break. I need them to be aware of that they are allowed to tell their needs. So we work on that and we work on the empowerment and we work on even from going from my classroom to specials is hard. Like in my classroom, they don't have to raise their hand at all times. Like we learn how to have a talk and like we're people. We don't, sometimes you do and like they get to know me and then we have that talk of like, you are going to go to this classroom and they are going to expect you to raise your hand.
Okay.
And that's again going back to being aware of your surroundings. So like being aware of your needs, but also being aware of your surroundings. What are your values and all that? So it does that's would say that is another challenge as well.
Yeah.
But I've been told like, well, you can't do that because what about next year? And I'm like, that's not my problem. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just not. Like, I have to
Yeah.
run my classroom on my values, on what I need to see in my kids. And I know that I'm producing kids who then are going to be in a better place no matter what, because it's life skills.
Well, and as you know, a lot of my listeners are school psychologists who, of course, aren't the ones in charge of telling teachers how to run their classrooms. A lot of times we provide feedback. So I'm kind of curious because a lot of times we love data and, hey, I heard this other thing that this other amazing teacher is doing. Is there any way that you are measuring that effectiveness of all of the work that you are putting into your fourth grade students?
Yeah, so we do. So for the social emotional learning programs that we're giving at school, they do like the pre and the post
Okay.
surveys. And then I will do pre and post surveys just for myself, like in the beginning of the year of like, how do you feel like you managed this? Or just little, questions. And then I will do another one like mid year. And then at the end of the year, I also do for my parent teacher conferences. A lot of times my kids are invited to them. Well, they're always invited, but they don't always show up. But they do their own they do their own self reflections, and I give the same self reflection throughout the year. And a lot of them have those. It's not just how am I doing in math, how am I doing, but it's like how are my thoughts? How is my motivation? How's my regulation? How am I feeling in the classroom? Is there anything I need? Is there anything that's working? Is there anything that's not working? And then, there's not necessarily formal data, but on Fridays I call it like a rose and thorns.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about like our rose for the week and then we'll talk about thorns for the week as well. So I'm intentionally listening to what has worked for them throughout the week and then what has not. And I'm listening to see like if they're picking up on the skills, like, oh, well, this didn't go well, but I was able to take a deep breath. Or even
Mhm.
in the check-ins in the morning, I'm able to kind of like hear how they're handling different situations. Like you'll hear in the beginning of the year, the fights with the sisters or the brothers or even on the playground. And then as the year goes on, there's a difference in the way in which they're handling it or looking at other people. So I do those things. I do the pre-assessments, the post-assessments in the sense of just like a Google form. And then our daily check-ins for me is like very telling as well. And then the kids, like this is not, again, it's not a formal assessment, but like I have kids who are like a few years ago, but I've had this happen one time that this like really stands out. They were going communion shopping and the mom was like so stressed. And she called me the next day. She's like, I just need you to know that my son told me I had to sit down and take a deep breath when we were in the dressing room. And like that to me, like I don't need data for that, And she's
Right.
like, I was just very stressed. Nothing was fitting whenever. And then he told me I have to sit down and I have to take a deep breath. I'm like, well, there you go. Like, again, that's that whole top down, bottom up. Like, we're going to teach each other. And that's huge.
That's incredible. Incredible. Well, for those that are listening who might be interested in just learning more about the work that you are doing, what are some actionable steps that people can take?
So one of the things they could do is they could follow me on Instagram, which is at Precious Presence 54. They could also visit my website, so I can give that to you to go into the show notes. And then I had another Instagram account, but I'm going to have it kind of like link where I called it Wisdom of Kids. So I'm going to start to show it like sharing, the tools that I'm doing and the tips that I'm doing in the classroom, the strategies that I'm using, and then just kind of like words or things that the kids are saying that to go back to like your data that are showing the link in which like what we're doing and, how they're picking up on it and how it's really making a difference.
That sounds incredible. Well, we will definitely add in your Instagram account and your website into the show notes so anyone who is interested in following have those links.
I have a Substack as well where I've been starting to blog a little bit about like my vision of schools and strategies that I've been working and all that as well. So that's another place to follow along.
Wonderful. Well, reflecting on when you were a first year educator, you kind of already talked about remembering some things from your student teacher year. We have a lot of listeners who are just beginning their journey in education. What advice would you give to someone starting out?
I would say start with themselves. And I would say start with, definitely setting the boundaries for their work and their life balance. And I would say also just starting with themselves and knowing that the way in which they are like approaching and showing up at the classroom is going to make the whole entire difference. So like if there's anything that you're going to put your time into, it's not going to be the lessons. It's not going to be the perfect Pinterest classrooms. It's not going to be, this is where in your introduction where I'm talking about like the outside versus the inside, and that inner work is so important because we cannot show up to our classroom and we can't be with the kids and we're not going to be able to get through that beautiful lesson that we spent so much time planning without our own self-regulation skills. And then I would also say to reflect on really spend time to reflect on the type of classroom that you want and what you want from your kids, and then make sure that you are putting that out into the classroom. So what I mean by that is like we started in our classroom doing a lot of nonverbal cues for the kids. Because I kept saying like, I want a calm classroom, or I want a classroom where the kids are regulated. And then I would hear my voice escalating because I'd be talking and that wasn't working. So I ended up getting like a rain stick to kind of calm them down. So really paying attention to if the outward appearance of what you want is not reflecting what you want inside, where in the inside are you not putting out? Because I do believe in a lot of like mirrors and projections, and that what's on the outside is really mirroring us. And that's hard. And I know that like, and it's not a blame thing. It's more of just like, am I asking the kids to, be calm, but I'm not being calm with myself? Am I
Yes.
asking the kids to, you know, put their best foot forward and try hard, but I'm burned out and I don't have anything else to give. So just really reflecting on themselves and putting themselves first and going back to that, put the oxygen mask on you first, making to-do lists of what needs to get done today and what can wait, and like really only focusing on the today and not, you know, working on not having to do everything at one time, but in this limited amount of time that we have, what really needs to get done. And then I know this is easier said than done because even as a teacher of 23 years, it's easier said than done, but I will not work during my lunch. So I know that that's not possible for everyone. And if it's not, that's okay. I would say then start with 5 minutes. Give yourself 5 minutes where you step out of that classroom, where you go outside, you go to your car, you take a walk, whatever it may be. But give yourself 5 minutes where you are not working. And then maybe you can get that to 6 and then 7, and then slowly you're going to start to see it. But to me, we need to again take our own power back and say like, no, we believe our kids deserve lunch. They need a break and we need it as well. And it's a very important to think about, what do I want my kids to know and how am I also doing that for myself? So if I want my kids to go out and play and have a lunch, I need to do that for myself as well. And again, that is an easier said than done. So I would start it at a minute, 2 minutes, and see how much time feels comfortable for you where you can take your time and then also do what you need to do. It'll all still be there tomorrow. So Like all the work is still going to be there. It's all going to be there tomorrow. So just take care of yourself because that's the most important.
Well, my last question for you is this podcast is called The Prepared School Psychologist. When you think of the word prepared, what do you do to help yourself feel more prepared in your role?
So again, I think meditation is my biggest thing. Meditation and mindfulness is my biggest thing. But for me to be prepared in the world, it's all going to go back to like, how am I doing the inner work for myself? Because my business Instagram is called Precious Presence. And I do believe that it all starts with the way in which you are presenting yourself, the way in which you are thinking about your own self as this precious being. And it's not about being a human doing, it's about being a human being. So the preparedness comes from, what am I doing before? How am I giving myself that self-love that I want to be able to then give to my kids?
This was amazing. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing all of these wonderful things with the listeners. Thank you, Cara.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, this concludes another episode of the Prepared School Psych Podcast. Maintaining a sense of preparedness and a commitment to ongoing personal development is key to excellence in our field. Stay tuned for future episodes and remember to subscribe for valuable insights delivered directly to you. Until next time, everyone. That concludes another episode of the Prepared School Psych Podcast. And I hope today's discussion equipped you not just with knowledge, but also the confidence to take action. Remember, every conversation we have and every resource we share builds a bridge towards a more inclusive and empowering learning landscape for our students. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast for more insightful conversations and resources to support your journey. Share this podcast with colleagues. We would love it if you would also rate and review the podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Just a reminder, everyone, the information and advice provided in this podcast are for guidance purposes only, and all listeners are required to follow both federal and state law and their own school district guidelines and policies. Thank you.